I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blumke.
And you're listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Be Secular. Be free to love, be able to choose, be accepted no matter your race, gender, sexual orientation, or belief system. Be Secular.
Be Secular merchandise allows you to display your support for equality and the separation of church and state, while also donating up to 50% of the profit from your purchase to nonprofits, groups, and artists that support those same values.
Go to www.besecular.com, pick your item, and then choose who you want to get a donation from your sale.
Listeners of this podcast will get a 10% discount if they use the promo code FRIENDLY. Make a statement. Be you. Be secular.
Liz Cavell graduated from Tulane University Law School in 2009 and worked for a while as a deputy public defender in southern Colorado. She currently works as a staff attorney with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Liz, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So we see FFRF in the news all the time because you guys are fighting legal battles, First Amendment cases all the time. How busy are all of you in this office? Because every time I read articles, I'm like, there has to be like 100 of you.
Yeah, we wish. It's crazy busy, and it's getting busier every year. And I'm one of 5 staff attorneys at FFRF, and I actually handle all of the intake for the legal department. So everybody that wants to report a complaint or a violation to FFRF sends that through me, and I evaluate reports and then decide what we may or may not be able to act on. So I probably talk to or correspond with between 2,500 and 3,000 people every year.
Wow.
Who are just contacting us to report something. And we do probably send out an average of 1,000 letters a year to different government entities about what we perceive to be violations. So, and it's getting heavier and heavier every year, and we've added staff every year. So,
but there's only 5 attorneys right now, including yourself.
That's right. Yeah,
that's
5.
Crazy. When people call you up and say, "Hey, this is going on in my neck of the woods. Is this a problem? Can FFRF help with this?" Do you have a percentage where you're like, "Yeah, we'll take a look at it," versus, "No, this isn't an issue"?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say a percentage of what we do. I mean, I kind of gave you some rough numbers. So if we're hearing from 2,500 people a year and we're sending out like 1,000 letters, but we do get a fair amount of complaints that just aren't quite state church violations, but, people are perceiving to be, or they don't involve government entities, but people are confused.
Right.
And then
like my Catholic school is teaching Catholicism to my kids. Like, that's not a problem.
Right.
My aunt wore a cross over to my house. Make her stop.
Yeah. And then just religion in public, where I think people are confused, like, the grocery store I shop at plays Christian music over the intercom, and I hate it, and, consumer complaints and stuff like that. But we do get tons of actionable complaints. I mean, a lot of times we can't get enough information from our complainants to move forward. But for the most part, people are ready to do some digging and tell us what we need to know. And as you know, Hemant, there are tons of violations going on everywhere.
Yeah, because I report on some of them from my site, and I'm not even touching a fraction of them. I know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most common complaint you get? Like, because I feel like I hear on our blog, a lot of city councils want to pray. I feel like that's
even after Grease v. Galloway. Yeah.
Right. Is that a common one? Right.
That's a tough one. And that's hugely popular. I mean, that's one of the most common complaints we've heard over the years. And of course, recently we've gotten less complaints about it because obviously people are starting to understand that the law is really bad and the case law has gotten worse. But by far, I would say the number one thing, general topic that we field complaints in are religion in public schools. And that can be broken down into a lot of subcategories, but generally just public schools and religion is by far the biggest complaint we hear all year.
So things like Pledge of Allegiance cases, religious assemblies in schools, or like a football coach, things like that?
You name it. So prayer at school-sponsored events. So prayer opening assemblies and prayer opening, official school-sponsored events like sports banquets and football games and graduation ceremonies. And then, down to faculty religion in the classroom, proselytizing teachers who don't understand that they can't, pray with their kindergartners before lunch and that sort of thing. And of course, a lot of coaches leading students in prayer. Something about football and religion is a big problem.
You know what? I literally just now realized that when I was in 4th grade, I had a teacher who proselytized to me. She said,
Hey!
I don't know how I've buried that memory for the last 20 years.
It's been repressed for this long, and now it's coming back up.
I remember very specifically her saying, to look around nature and say there's no God would be like having a gourmet dinner and saying there's no chef. And I was in 4th grade and was like, bullshit, come on.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of something that's totally inappropriate in a public school classroom. And that's the scary thing, too, is, we're hearing about a huge number of things, and that's just the things that kids know to tell their parents, and parents
right. These are just the people contacting you.
Sure.
Right. So just imagine, what's going on in classrooms everywhere that we don't know about. So it's good that we get to be so active in schools because we get to fire a lot of warning shots. And
Right. When you have a couple thousand complaints coming in per year, does anything surprise you anymore? Or have you seen it all by now?
That's a great question. It's funny. There's so much repetition. And so we are kind of so cynical at times. But I have to say, there's probably something every week or every couple of weeks that still knocks our socks off.
If you hear the same complaint over and over, do you just send the same letter with just a different mailing address?
Well,
write cover letters.
I mean, we have some seriously repetitious complaints that we do use the same types of template letters. I mean, the legal argument is exactly the same in a lot of circumstances. Right. So we do just kind of tweak the facts. And then oftentimes, there are very unique situations that require a special touch. It's always fun to write those letters.
Yeah.
So how frequently, you send 1,000 letters out a year, how frequently does, I assume usually when somebody gets a letter, they're like, oh, sorry.
I made a mistake.
Or they don't know, or, they just are ignorant of how law works. But how often do you have to pursue legal action?
Yeah, so remarkably, we don't end up filing a lot of lawsuits compared to the number of complaints we send out, although we do have a lot of lawsuits. I think we have 12 or 13 ongoing right now, which is the most in FFRF history, and more and more kind of in the pipeline as we expand our resources. But it kind of just depends, and unfortunately, a lot of stars have to align in order for us to be able to sue, even when we're not getting the compliance that we want. We have to have a plaintiff, which you guys know is a huge problem and a difficult thing, getting somebody to come forward.
It requires bravery and standing and all the legal stuff you need, too.
Exactly. And really the courage, and not to say that it's any easy thing, because these people are in communities where, they have a lot to lose, and the mob is a really serious consideration, and sometimes it's just not worth it. So
how do you
And we also need, I'm sorry, Hannah.
No, go
we
ahead.
also need local counsel. So we need an attorney who's in that state and in that area that can liaise with our attorneys, because we need to file lawsuits where the action is happening. So a lot of stars have to align for us to be able to sue, but there's definitely no shortage of people to sue.
How do you guys, if there's 5 staff attorneys, how do you all divvy up all these different cases? Is there someone whose job it is to, you're on the War on Christmas beat and you're on city councils?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Rebecca Marker, who I'm sure you know, has been at FFRF for years, I suppose it's been since our legal department was formed in 2008. So she's our senior staff attorney, and she divides up the workload amongst our attorneys, especially as we increase staff and as we kind of move to other responsibilities. So the way we do it now is pretty much by subject area. So I handle complaints that have to do with civil rights violations. So all those church bulletin discounts that you write about, and discounts for Christian groups and church groups, any letters that come in anywhere about that, I would handle. Andrew Seidel handles complaints about chaplains, any chaplain program anywhere. And then when it comes to the really fun stuff, we share all the work.
So all of you handle the war on Christmas beats.
Yeah, exactly. We divvy up the war on Christmas by federal circuit. We divvy up schools by circuit. So we all get to work on the really big stuff.
I can't wait. War on Christmas is coming again. It's
I know.
my favorite time of year.
It's right around the corner.
I can't tell. I can't tell if the people in the FFRF offices are thinking what Jessica just said, like, yes, this is the stuff the media loves, or if they're saying, crap, I got a lot of work.
It's like
my
tax season for them.
Yeah, it's like tax season for accountants or something. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have a pile of stuff I got to do now.
Exactly. It's a little bit of both, I think. I mean, by far, it is our busiest time of year because Christmas and the holidays also kind of converges with, the end of the school semester and a lot of school violations that sort of tend to coincide with the holidays. And then, of course, there's the war on Christmas. So nativities on public property and just general Christmas mania everywhere in government. And so there's just an awful lot of work, so it is a crazy, hectic time, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's so much fun. You know how the media frenzy, the media frenzy is really fun to just jump into and have fun with. And we get a lot of great victories, and we get a lot of publicity, and, we get to really build our membership and get out there and get a lot done.
I should say, we're joking about this and stuff, but it's a very serious issue that this happens so much and people put so much attention on it.
Say with a smile on your face.
Yeah,
it's very serious.
To have to deal with this stuff over and over, it's kind of, I'm sure it's frustrating, it's annoying, but it's like, well, hey, if this gets our name out in the public, that's great.
Right.
But we wish we didn't have to fight these battles at all because you should all know better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right, we always kind of joke that, ideally our goal is to, work ourselves out of existence, but that's really the truth. I mean, really, if there is perfect neutrality in all government and public schools, religious neutrality, we wouldn't need to be around and we wouldn't be busy. So, I mean, we don't seem to be anywhere near that day, but it can be really, really frustrating. And all I can say is, we have enough victories and good outcomes that kind of keep us going. And, it's always one big blow, one bad Supreme Court case followed by, a couple of good outcomes in different circuits and some good victories in the schools. And so we're still going.
Is it a particularly stressful job, or is it just one of those, just move your nativity scene? Why are you being an idiot about this? Or do you take it home with you? Is it really stressful for you? Or is it easy to kind of look at it in big picture of this guy's just being dumb about the nativity scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great job, of course, right? Because most everybody, everybody I work with is really passionate, is having a lot of fun. I mean, as for a lawyer, at least the legal staff, I mean, it's not so easy to get a job in constitutional law. It's not easy to get a job at a nonprofit. That's a really fun culture and atmosphere. And so we all really have a great time. I mean, it can be really stressful, just like a lot of nonprofit work. I mean, we have low resources and loads of work. And so we're always, working with limited resources. But, yeah, I mean, for me and a lot of my colleagues, we're atheists and good regular people, and so this is a really important issue for us. It feels good to be able to do that at work.
Do you ever find you're kind of empathetic? It's a little town and, they've had their little nativity scene up on their the front lawn of the wherever they
City
put their
Hall.
City Hall. Thank you. Like, do you ever feel empathetic, or are you always just like, come on, dude, like, just move it 20 feet to the right and you're fine?
Do you feel bad for the Christians who really want their nativity seen on public property?
I mean, it's a reasonable question, right? Because, I mean, sometimes, I don't know if I would say empathetic, but I certainly understand why it can be very hard for people in these communities to grasp, what the issues are, because, you hear the same arguments over and over, and I personally get so sick of them that
Sure.
it's just eye roll, but it's true. I mean, we're an outside organization, and if they've been doing something the same way for 25 years, it's very hard, no matter what the law is, to say, hey, you've been getting away with this, but you can't get away with it anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of human nature to just be defensive about that, and I understand that. I don't care, but I understand.
Do you think it's kind of indicative of the fact that there is very little actual real Christian persecution in this country, that like the thing that really revs their I can't talk today. That revs their engine is the fact that like I can't have this thing where I want this thing. Like, do you think the
like
fact
Jon
that,
Stewart said, you're complaining like the war on Christmas with like never or not always getting your way.
Right, exactly.
Like, it's not persecution.
Right.
Well, it is. It's kind of, it has, and you guys, obviously, everyone can see this. I mean, it's kind of this new, weird kind of co-opting of the concept of persecution to really just mean continued privilege, right? Like,
right.
I am I have this built-in institutional privilege, and I expect that privilege to continue.
Right.
And when it doesn't continue, I'm persecuted. I mean, which is ridiculous, but has become this very common, warped way of talking about, removing religion from government. It's crafty. It's very hard to talk around that, but of course, it's absurd. I mean, neutrality, obviously I'm preaching to the choir, but neutrality has nothing to do with persecution. I mean, the absence of all religion is not the promotion of atheism, and that's the hardest thing to really convince people of.
Well, and it's crazy that they're like, oh, Christians are, under attack in this country, when literally every president ever has been some kind of Christian. And it just seems...
Yeah, it's very hard
crazy
to be overrepresented.
Well, there was a study that came out not too long ago from when we're taping this that they asked people, do you feel like these groups are discriminated against? And I think gays and lesbians was at the top of the list with like 60 to 70% of people felt they were being discriminated against. Atheists were at 27%. Only 27% felt atheists were discriminated against.
Wow.
Evangelical Christians, 31%.
Well,
More people thought evangelicals had it harder in this country than atheists
was
did.
that self-reporting? Like, I'm talking on behalf of atheists and...
No, I think this is in general. Like, do you think this group is discriminated against? This one? Yeah, this is in general. It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I think it's scary, but I think that's a real sort of illustration of how successful that rhetoric has been. I mean, it's been a very sort of successful spin campaign about what it means to be Christian in this country and what secularism and separation of church and state means and what it looks like. I mean, it's so scary because it works and people buy it.
Yeah, like any of us would struggle greatly running for any kind of public office just on the merit of us being atheists. But
This podcast is going to come back to haunt us, is what you're saying.
yeah,
It's too late, Emmett.
I know.
Jessica Blumke, Hemant Mehta, 2020.
Gone. Never happening.
But yet it's the Christians who have
They
it
have
hard
it
out
so
there.
hard, yeah.
It's rough.
Do you
Rough out
ever,
there.
Liz, do you ever speak with your cultural opponents? And by that, I mean, do you ever speak with like attorneys from the Alliance Defense Fund or the ACLJ, whatever that Christian version
ACLJ?
is? It's the Christian version of the ACLU
What
or
does the
something.
J stand for?
I don't know.
Justice?
I'm sure it does, yeah.
Okay.
But like, do you ever speak to their
Justice,
attorneys? Because
that's a good
they're
bet.
pretty much doing the same thing you're doing, but on the other side. And I don't really understand what their arguments are per se, but do you ever talk to
Yeah,
them?
exactly. So yeah, as far as do we speak to them frequently? I mean, I guess we try not to. They are our opponents in a lot of these cases, and so we do find ourselves sparring and sending each other strongly worded letters. But,
I want to see these email threads.
Passive-aggressive legalese.
the way it usually happens is we're contacting generally government entities directly, and we're putting them on notice about their illegal conduct. And then once our, complaints get a lot of media attention, all of a sudden one of these legal groups swoops in, and they've donated or they've, offered their pro bono services to the city of blah, blah, or the school district XYZ. And so it usually happens after we've already been corresponding with the government entity. And so there's not a real need to correspond with those groups unless litigation actually starts and we find ourselves having to deal with them.
And it's not really, when they say, if these Christian groups say to a city council, like, we'll defend you all pro bono, it's not really pro bono, is it?
Right, I know. We try and convince, especially school districts, poor school districts. We try to convince school districts of this very often because we'll send them a complaint or a letter explaining something truly illegal. A great example was, and I'm sure you followed this early last year, Jackson, Ohio, the Jesus painting that was displayed in a school in Jackson, Ohio.
Yeah.
Just a giant painting of Jesus in the school.
Right.
Public school, I presume.
Clear-cut violation.
Yeah.
Granted, they'd gotten away with it for a very long time, and so it was a hard pill to swallow. But, case law directly on point in the Sixth Circuit where they're located. That was a loser from the beginning for that school district. And when that got a lot of media attention and there was, public outcry and the mob showed up to the school board meeting, one of these groups, I think it was Liberty Institute in that case, kind of got into the media fray and offered their services pro bono to the school district, and they're going to fight tooth and nail. And they, the school district did it, and they fought that case. We had to sue them for the removal of that painting. We litigated that for a year, and they ended up settling and taking it down and paying ACLU and FFRF attorney's fees.
And those attorney's fees are coming out of the school district's budget, which is taxpayer money.
Right.
And it's not like the Christian group is covering that for them.
Exactly. So they're not charging the school district legal fees of their own. But if the school district loses, they're on the hook for fees, and
they're going to lose
in these
damages.
Yeah.
You sound so regretful of that having to happen. You're just like, they had to do this, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
You don't want taxpayers' money.
No, it's terrible. It's awful. And of course, we're corresponding for months with the school district, basically just saying, come on, you really need to comply.
Yeah, it's not like you're trying to take their money.
time.
Like,
No.
You're going to lose this case, save your money,
Right.
just do the right thing.
Buy some books.
And you have these Christian groups saying, no, let's fight. And it's like,
don't
the
do
loser are the schools and the students.
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's a lose-lose. And the problem is, too, not only is it the offering pro bono legal services that's misleading, it's misleading to swoop in and suggest that they've got a fighting case. And a lot of times these cases that get a lot of media attention that these legal groups want to attach themselves to so that they can fundraise on it, they're losers. And it's wrong. It's wrong to
Do the Christian groups
suggest that they can fight?
Right.
Do the Christian groups swooping in at this point, do they know these cases are losers? Some of these are not ambiguous. Some of these, like you're saying, like a giant Jesus painting, that's clear cut. And you would think Liberty Institute or whatever would look at that and say, yeah, we're not going to win no matter what we do here. Maybe we can fundraise off of it, but we're not going to legally win this case. Do they know that, or do they genuinely believe the court's going to side with them?
I don't know. I guess I can only speculate. It's not in terms of there are tons of times when we complain and it's in a legal gray area. And FFRF's position is that it's a violation, but by no means is it clear what a court would do. And generally, we're not taking lawsuits in that gray area, right?
Right.
So in a case like, for example, Jackson, Ohio, with the Jesus painting on the wall, I mean, they had some theories that they tried to work with in terms of, whether or not it was a forum and, the general kind of places where you can run to when you've got a religious display. But for the most part, it was a pretty clear-cut legal analysis in terms of what a court would do. And so that's a perfect example of, I can't imagine that different lawyers would see this differently. I can't imagine that.
Let me ask you, when you guys get these cases and you divvy them up amongst the lawyers, I realize that, if it's a city council case or a war on Christmas case, you've probably seen the issue before, you know what the case law is, and when you're writing these letters, you can kind of say like, hey, attorney over here, here's the issue, you just go ahead and write the letter, and there's nothing really to do. What's the research process like if it is something that is not one you've seen before? Like, what do you guys do if you come across a case, you've never seen it before, and you got to write a letter of complaints? What's the research? What do you do? Who do you go to or talk to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have a lot of, it does happen. I mean, like I said, we get so much repetition, but every now and then, and it's pretty often, we get something that stumps me. If it comes through me first, and I'm like, wow, I'm stumped. And we have a lot of institutional knowledge at our office, so usually we're brainstorming amongst the five of us and seeing, and sometimes Dan and Annie Laurie, who have been doing this forever.
And so they're the co-presidents, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Dan and Annie Laurie, the co-presidents of our organization. They've been doing this since the 70s, and so they've seen a lot, and so they have a lot of good examples. But generally, if we're all stumped and it's something we really need to research the legality of, we're just doing typical lawyer stuff. So we're on Westlaw, we're searching federal cases to see whether or not a court's ever dealt with what we're looking at and where we stand. And so it's fun. It's like, it's research. It's kind of doing a little investigation trail and figuring out what the law is, and sometimes there's a great case you don't know about, and sometimes there's a terrible case you don't know about.
Has that ever happened where you did that research and you came across a case where you're like, wow, if this is the precedent, then we're going to lose because that's not what happened last time. And if that happened, would you ever say, well, you know what, even though we think we're right here, we're going to lose, let's not pursue it?
Yeah, that has happened, of course. I mean, there are some areas, as you know, of establishment clause, case law, jurisprudence that are terrible. They're unfavorable to our position, and we come across that, and we kind of do one of two things. We realize, okay, we can't really make a legal complaint here because the law's not on our side. So, is it something that really speaks to the policy purpose of our organization? Like, is it worth it to really get our voice out there and just send a policy letter, right? It's coming from Dan and Annie Laurie and the organization, but it's not a legal complaint because, we have no legal threats to make. So we're just sending a policy letter that says, hey, we represent thousands and thousands of atheists and agnostics, and what you're doing is really offensive to us, and here's why you should care.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Which is not a legal threat, but it's still important sometimes.
Just to get your message out there.
Sure. Yeah, I never thought of that. Is there any particular kind of lawsuit or policy that you have a hard time conveying to the public at large? I guess maybe even
Jesus in a public school, that's pretty easy to tell people, yeah, you can't really do that. Is there anyone that's hard?
Yeah, I guess even the nativity scene, people are like, what's the big deal? It's a nativity scene.
They made movies about that.
That's my Fox News voice.
I like that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what our heart. I mean, we have so much. There's so much that we do that's really hard to sell. I don't know what's our hardest sell. I guess. Oh, geez.
I put you on the spot.
Really
Sorry.
It's okay. I think people have a hard time understanding our position on a lot of our lawsuits. I mean, sometimes it's really clear cut, and I think people tend to be more understanding of where the boundaries are, like in public schools. But then again, sometimes I'm really surprised by the public reaction to our public school complaints that we think are so clear cut, and that, you know, people just are really having a hard time understanding our position.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a very serious question, which is that you guys are tackling very serious topics, something that obviously rubs a lot of Christians the wrong way. Do you all receive any, like, death threats, nasty phone calls? I don't know how bad it gets. But does that happen? And are you all worried about that at all?
Yeah, that is a great question. And yeah, that does happen. I don't know if you guys deal with this, but we deal with it absolutely all the time. And I'm on intake, so all the emails that come to the legal department come to me. So I see a whole mess of prank email and just nasty email. And sometimes we do get threatening emails and phone calls. It doesn't happen every single day, but it happens very often. And especially when we've got a big complaint that's blowing up in the media, we get a lot of threats and threatening calls. And it can be scary. You know, sometimes we're out there on, you know, doing news interviews and TV interviews. And so sometimes people are calling and they're saying by name, you know, Liz Cavell, Liz Cavell should die, and Liz Cavell this. And so that can be really, really scary.
Have you ever gotten threats from it?
I don't get that many. I've gotten occasional ones, but nothing I've ever felt like I need to call someone about.
Yeah.
I imagine
you're friendly.
Well, that's the running lie. That's what we tell people. I do get plenty of emails from people saying you're not really friendly, because they don't like something I wrote. But I haven't gotten any threats, and I'm sure I realize that, you know, if I was a woman, I probably very well would. Mm-hmm. And I imagine if I was spearheading, not reporting on these issues, but actually spearheading it like you guys are at FFRF,
right,
it would definitely make me more vulnerable to all that.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, we do, whenever we get something that's a bona fide threat, we do report that to the police. When we get threats by mail or threats of things by mail, we have even involved the FBI, and they've really taken our threats seriously, local police and even the local FBI office, when there have been really serious mail threats. You know, people say the craziest things, and people have threatened to mail us a bomb or, you know, mail us something that's going to kill everybody. And so, I mean, usually... You say that like it's people, so like,
it just happens every day.
It happens a lot.
That's disturbing.
I mean, usually, you know, you get a sense that people are crackpots, and I mean, who knows where they are, but we do take it seriously whenever there's a threat like that, and we file a report. And so we feel pretty good about our procedure for dealing with it, and it does ebb and flow. So there are times when we're riding high with no threats.
Well, on that cheery note, I think we're good. And can people donate to the FFRF? What can we do?
Yeah, where can they learn about you guys and pitch in if they want?
Yeah, so FFRF.org is our website. That's where you can read all about our organization, including all of our ongoing legal challenges, and that's where you can report a violation. So if you go to the legal tab, you can see report a state church violation, fill out the form, and that goes to my email box, and we can evaluate what's going on and maybe help you.
This makes me want to go watch Inherit the Wind again.
Yeah.
I'm feeling very into it.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Thanks so much, Liz.
Thanks for joining us, Liz.
No problem. It's great talking to you guys.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. This episode was taped at Cinnamon Sound Studios in Aurora, Illinois, and the music was written and performed by Brad Chagdis. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a contribution at patreon.com/Hemant, that's He-Man T. We appreciate your support. I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blumke. We hope you'll join us next time.